Hey guys, what's up? My name is Sky Webb and I'm here to talk about a true crime story that I cannot get off my mind. But before I get started, I just want to put out a little disclaimer that I mean no harm to any of the victims or the victims' families, and I wish everyone who was hurt within this story the most peace and solace either in rest or in recovery. With that out of the way, happy True Crime Thursday. Today we're going to look into the death of Brian Wells, who was the pizza delivery guy who basically got roped into this crazy full-on heist burglary scheme plot thing that literally is like plucked out of a movie. Like, it's crazy. The thing is though, it's pretty complicated and there's a lot of different theories and a lot of like he said, she said kind of shit going on, so I'm going to have to break it down into like pieces. And I just really want to state that I remember hearing about this and I remember seeing it on TV, and I'm only just now finding out what might have actually been like what happened, and I'm just really shook. So I hope you enjoy. On the 20th of August 2003, Mamma Mia's Pizza, which is located in Erie, Pennsylvania, gets a delivery call around lunchtime. The caller wants to order 2 large sausage and pepperoni pizzas, and they try to give like the address to be delivered to, but the owner, who is the person who picked up the phone, can't understand what they're saying, can't like make out the address. So he hands the phone over to Brian Wells. So Brian Wells was 46 years old and he had actually worked at Mamma Mia's Pizza for 10 years previous to this. So that's a really long time. He was a really like reliable worker. He was a really good worker, hard worker. He had a pretty good relationship with the owner and everyone else who worked there, and pretty much everyone who knew him had like a pretty respectful relationship with him. Out of those 10 years at working at Mamma Mia's, he had only called in late for work one time, and that was because his cat died. So he was definitely reliable when it came to his work ethic. So Brian took down the address, which was 8361 Peach Street, and he agreed to make the delivery himself, even though it was actually nearing the end of his shift. So normally you kind of just wouldn't take that, you'd let the next person do it and like go home and finish your shift. But he agreed to do it, so once the pizza was ready, he began the delivery. Okay, so now we're gonna fast forward actually 2 hours into the future, the past, but you know what I mean? And we'll get back to the delivery in a minute. So 2 hours later, Brian enters PNC Bank at 2:30 p.m. and he's wearing a white shirt that says guest, which previous to the delivery he wasn't wearing, but now he is. And with him, he brings a shotgun disguised as like a weird cane. He slides a note to the bank teller which says he wants $250,000. And at this point, it's really obvious that he's wearing some kind of bomb or contraption. It's a neck brace cuff thing, and like it has a box in his chest, which you can see under the shirt. So at this point, it's obvious that there's like an immediate threat with this note. He says that he only has 15 minutes. And they sort of put together that in 15 minutes this bomb could potentially go off. Unfortunately, or fortunately, the bank teller says, I can't get into the vault, I can't access the vault like that quickly, nor can I do it by myself. So I can't get you that much money, but here you have this, it's $8,000, which is considerably less than what he asked for, but he took it. And then he left behind an envelope for the police as well as his license. And then he took a lollipop from the stand and sucked on it as he left with his $8,000 in tow. Almost immediately after leaving the bank, a witness from inside the bank called the police on Brian, and 15 minutes later, the police was there to arrest him. Police immediately noticed the collar that he was wearing, and so they cuffed him and left him in the middle of the parking lot near the Macca's, which was near the bank, which is where they found him, and kind of backed away to what they considered to be a safe distance before they like asked him more questions. So Brian told police that he had been attacked by 3 black men who had jumped him, put this collar around his neck, and then forced him to rob the bank. He claimed that there was a number of different tasks that he had to complete and that he was being watched, and if he didn't complete each task, like the bomb would go off. And he said, I have no choice, there's a bomb in me, like help. So police decided that the best course of action was to try and clear the area, get rid of any witnesses and pedestrians and people who could potentially be hurt, and they tried to talk Brian into not detonating the bomb himself, because at this point they didn't really believe that it wasn't his bomb, because he had been the one to go into the bank and rob it, and he's the one wearing the bomb, so they thought it was his plan. So they called the bomb squad at 3:04 p.m, which is only 10 minutes after originally arresting Brian. And besides that though, they didn't make any effort themselves to try and get the collar off, because as I said, they didn't really believe that he was innocent or a victim in this. They thought that he was a suicide bomber. So they just backed off and was all right, the bomb squad will be here soon. And also, even if they had believed him, there's not a lot they could do to try and get the bomb off in case the bomb went off by accident, which when I was a kid and seeing this, I did not understand, and I was horrified that no one helped him. And my dad was like, they don't want to die, duh. So at this point, Brian's starting to freak the fuck out. Up until now, he'd been calmly trying to explain the situation to police, thinking they'll help me, it's fine. But as it's nearing those 15 minutes, he's like, I'm gonna die, get this fucking thing off me, let me go or get it off me, I'm gonna die. He kept asking, why isn't anyone trying to get this off me? Can somebody please help me? Why aren't you guys helping me? Check. Then just 2 minutes before the bomb squad arrived at 3:18, the bomb went off. It began to beep and got faster and faster and faster, and then it detonated and left a big hole in Brian's chest. He immediately flung back and died on the pavement, surrounded by police and medical officers and witnesses in front of everyone, which is full on. After this, the police found a number of handwritten notes and instructions that basically instructed how to rob the bank and gave a number of other tasks that they wanted this person to complete, and it was addressed to the bomb hostage. The instructions began by saying this powerful booby-trapped bomb collar can be removed only by following our instructions. Act now, think later, or you will die. They explained that once all the tasks were completed, that the bomb hostage would be, I don't know why I did that because he was a bomb hostage, the bomb hostage would be led to a combination to disarm the bomb. One of the instructions told him to enter the bank quietly, hand the note to the teller, rob the bank, and it said, use your weapon if necessary, which is a huge ask to ask a random civilian bomb hostage. I mean, people probably would use it if it meant saving their lives, but also surely there's a lot of people who wouldn't be able to actually pull the trigger on someone who's just trying to stop someone from robbing the bank and thinking you're the bad guy. That's some Black Mirror shit. And then the notes also claim that he was being watched, so don't draw any attention to yourself, no cops, no carrying on, just get it done because we're watching you and we'll set it off if you try and raise the alarm, you know what I mean? So then the police looked at the next note, which told him to exit the bank and go to the Macca's, which was nearby, and there's a flower bed and a sign, the flower bed's under the sign and the note's in the flower bed on a rock. Go find that and that'll be your next instructions. But Brian obviously never got to complete those next steps in the little task thing, and the next step was the money drop off. So had he have gotten away at this point, the bad guys would have had the money, although only 8 grand, they probably would have killed him anyway. So then the police started to play the game themselves. They started to try and finish this little scavenger hunt so that they could find the culprits, but they started running out of notes. They wouldn't find the next note even though they were looking where they were told to look, so they sort of assumed that whoever was in charge of it just had called it off. They also concluded at this point that whoever had started all this and been behind the scenes pulling the strings, had never intended for Brian Wells to actually live. They think that they purposely made him very, very obvious. Like, why would you hide a note at Macca's in a very, like, next to the drive-through under a sign in a flower bed? Like, that's a very suspicious place to hide it, especially if people are watching. You could obviously stop other people from getting it, like, you know what I mean? So they just sort of came to the conclusion that he had been intended to die. Either they were going to kill him or they were going to get the money, keep him going on this little scavenger hunt after people had already called the police on him, and then like hoped that he had either been killed by the bomb or taken by police as like the scapegoat. So that's kind of fucked up. So now let's go back to the pizza delivery. So after all of this happened and the investigation began, they could see that back at the pizza delivery time, when he went to go and deliver this pizza, it wasn't to a home address or a shop or anything like that. It was actually a TV transmission area in like a pretty secluded spot on Peach Street, which is the same street that the bank was on. So obviously they went there and checked out the area, and they found some of Brian's footsteps. They found tire tread from his car, and they were able to confirm that like obviously he had been there presumably to drop off this pizza. But they couldn't really find any evidence to support who might have been there, like, with him. They didn't really find a lot to, you know, give them any kind of lead or any kind of clue as to who might have been there. Brian had told police that he was attacked by 3 black men before obviously dying. But because he died, that's all they knew. They didn't get to question that, they didn't get to look into that, and now that they had, like, gone to the spot where he obviously would have had the collar put on him, they can't even determine who was there. So now if we fast forward to a couple of weeks after this robbery and after Brian's death, the police get a very interesting phone call, and this is going to sound completely unrelated, but just bear with me. They get a call from a man called William A. Rothstein, and he's a woodwork teacher and a massive hoarder, and he worked at the local high school. He calls police and he claims that there is a dead body in his freezer at 8645 Peach Street. And he claims that he's storing this dead body in his freezer as a favor for his friend named Marjorie. Marjorie Diehl-Armstrong was William's friend, but they were a little bit more than friends because they had actually been engaged not once, but twice. Which is a weird amount of times to be engaged, in my opinion. Basically, her story was she had killed her husband with a shotgun while he was asleep, and then she basically called up William and said, "Hey William, can you do me a favor? Can you please just hide his body in your freezer for just a little bit of time, please? Thank you." And this murder happened on the 13th of August, about 6 weeks prior to this police phone call. So he had this body for 6 weeks in his freezer. Now, William claims that the reason he decided to call the police is because Marjorie had suggested that they use an ice grinder to grind up her husband's dead body. And this was drawing the line for William. He can keep a dead body, but don't talk to him about grinding it up because he has morals. At this point, Marjorie was placed under custody, and William, he agreed to testify against her, and he claimed that he felt so guilty this whole time for having the body there of a man he knew, by the way, just throwing it out there. So guilty to the point where he said he felt suicidal. And after this, police actually did find a suicide note in one of his like top drawers. This is where the case gets interesting and where these two seemingly separate cases collide. He started the suicide note by saying, "This has nothing to do with the Wells case. Brian Wells, the pizza bomber, has nothing to do with him." That's funny because no one fucking thought that it did until now. Police were immediately like, "What the fuck do you mean? That's a bizarre thing to say. No one thought that it had anything to do with that." But like the only connection that they could see between these two people were like being on Peach Street. Like that's really the only connection that they had, and Peach Street was a big street. So They were like, what? William lived in one of the closest houses to the TV transmission area where Brian made the pizza delivery, and it was actually only a 5-minute walk from there to the tower. So that was like the biggest connection at first glance. By this time, police knew that the phone call that made the pizza delivery was made at a Shell petrol station, which was only half a mile away from William's house. Also on Peach Street. Now, there was a woman who worked in this Shell garage, and her name was Lorraine, and she said that William would come in like fairly often, and he'd buy the paper and he'd buy cookies and he'd often use the payphone. Now, all of this is obviously like circumstantial, coincidental, like it's on the same street. That kind of makes sense that they would go there. Makes sense because the bank was on that street, that someone else could have potentially gone there. So no one was like, it's him, it's him, it's him. But it was enough to be a little bit suspicious. And that, and the fact that William was an engineer and he had the mechanical expertise necessary to build a homemade bomb collar, like the one that Brian wore. Police searched his house and they found piles and piles and piles of machinery and parts and tools, and it was a bit of a mess. Now let's go back to Marjorie. Marjorie obviously killed her latest partner, but that wasn't the first. She'd also killed a previous boyfriend called Robert Thomas by shooting him in the head in 1984. And this was something she actually confessed to and went to court over, but she was eventually acquitted due to claiming that it was in like self-defense, not necessarily self-defense, but because and due to domestic violence. So she was acquitted of that murder despite like very obviously admitting to doing it. But that's not all. Her first husband died by hanging himself, and her second husband died by accidentally falling backwards and hitting his head on a coffee table. That's a very unfortunate death. Also very easy to fake. Isn't it a bit odd that she has so many dead husbands and boyfriends in her one little lifetime? She suffered from multiple mental illnesses, including bipolar and narcissism disorder, and she was known for being pretty intelligent. The problem was, though, she was a massive show-off, like when it came to that intelligence. So she thought she was smarter than what she might have actually been. And people that she went to school with claimed, yeah, she thought she was smarter than anyone else in the room. She always had to outdo everyone, be better, prove that she was better. Like, she could never just keep it to herself, you know? So now the FBI got involved and they did a criminal profile on the suspect. And I've spoken about this before. In the cheerleading case I did, I'm forgetting, Kristen Costers, I believe. I'll link the video down below. I did cover this sort of FBI profiling thing in that video because I found it really, really interesting, and it proves how accurate these profiles can be. But basically what they do is build up a profile of what they think the suspect will be, like what they will look like, what they will act like, what their lives have been like, what their childhood was like just random facts about them, and they use statistics of known incarcerated criminals and put it all into one. It's very, very interesting. It doesn't make sense in my brain how that works. Like, it goes to show that we are so, like, we don't have as much control as I think that we think we fucking do. Like, I don't know how to explain myself right now, but I think it's very interesting. Moving on. So they did this, and they determined that the suspect would be a hoarder, would be comfortable with power mechanics and shop tools, have access to work with these tools alone, and that they would take pride in their creations. So this sounds a lot like William, right? A hoarder, check. Works with tools, check. Takes pride in his creations. You mean like a shotgun disguised as a cane and like a fucking shock collar bomb thing? Check. The FBI profile also said that the suspect would have a superiority complex as well as a very violent past, which sounds a lot like Marjorie at this point because she is very violent. Ask her boyfriends. And everyone knows she likes to feel superior. Check. So at this point the police were like, okay, they worked together. They did it. obviously. So now if we jump all the way to 2005, the police get another phone call from someone claiming that a man called Kenneth Barnes was involved in the Brian Wells murder. Kenneth Barnes was a TV repairman before losing his job and becoming a crack dealer. And this guy Kenneth had a connection to Marjorie. Kenneth and Marjorie had been friends and they used to go fishing together and hang out. And this all came out after a sex worker claimed that she slept with both Kenneth and Brian Wells at Kenneth's home, and she knew them and their connections. And this all came out because of her. So that meant Brian and Kenneth were connected, and Kenneth and Marjorie were connected, and Marjorie and William were connected. Kenneth's brother-in-law was the one to turn him in, claiming that he always would talk about how he was involved in this fucking murder, and his brother-in-law was like, we don't fuck with that. It's not okay. And at the time that Kenneth's brother called the police on him, he was actually already in jail for unrelated drug charges. So when the police went to question him, he said, "I'm happy to exchange information for a reduced sentence." He also claimed that Marjorie was the mastermind behind everything. He claimed that Marjorie had wanted that money so that she could pay to have her father killed by a hitman, because apparently he was going through his money too quickly and she wanted that money for herself. Like, that was going to be her inheritance. So she was like, okay, well, I'll just kill him off and get it now. All of what Kenneth was saying right now, though, to police in order to try and get like a reduced sentence had already been corroborated by inmates in prison with Marjorie. So he didn't really help that much. It was just like, cool, so we're right then. Apparently Marjorie had been quite the show-off and the blabbermouth in prison, talking to all her inmate buddies in prison about the pizza bummer case and how clever she was and how clever it all was. The people in prison, though, they alleged that the reason she killed her husband was because he was going to come out and tell the truth about the pizza bomber case, and she couldn't afford for that to happen. So she was just like, oh, off him then. That's why they believed that William was more inclined to actually keep the dead body, not just as a favor, but because it implicated him as well. Because had she had not killed him, he might have been dragged into, like, getting in trouble for it. So now they went back to Marjorie and tried to question her, and she promised to tell investigators everything if they would move her to a minimal security prison instead of the one she was in. She swore up and down that she had nothing to do with the plot, she had nothing to do with the planning, but she did admit that she handed over little kitchen timers for the bomb for like William to do. She also admitted that she was in the area on the day that all this went down and that she was actually driving with William earlier that day. She also said that they had stopped at the Shell station where William then went on to use the phone, basically implying it was him and I had nothing like to do with it. She then told the FBI that she wouldn't tell anything more, she wouldn't speak anymore without getting immunity, and the FBI was like, no, you dumb bitch, you've just told us enough to indict you. Like, are you dumb? So now she claimed that William was the mastermind. He planned everything. He knew everything. It was all William. And the shocking part is that now she claimed that Brian was in on the plan. So now they look into this theory that perhaps Brian was actually in on this fucking plot. And the first thing that they sort of question is his story was that 3 black men were the ones who attacked him, and there was no evidence of this at all. It's very suspicious because there are 3 suspects, none of them are black, and only 2 of them are men. But the number's right. There also wasn't any evidence of like an attack, like a full physical attack on his body. So they were like, well, how did they get this collar on you to such, like, how without any physical evidence of that? They also spoke to a number of witnesses at the bank when he went in there and like handed over the note, and they said that he seemed very cool, calm and collected, not seeming really nervous, not seeming like stressed by any means, and they said he was just like just chilling. He even went up to the counter and started sucking on a lollipop. At least that's what people claimed they saw. One even claimed that he started swinging around his gun cane like he was Charlie Chaplin as he was leaving the bank, which is Like, none of that makes sense if he seriously was freaking out that there was like a bomb collar on his neck and that he was gonna die and all the shit was gonna happen. Like, that doesn't make sense. You would be walking in there fucking trembling in your boots. Like, I don't get it. Police started to believe that maybe Brian actually had been in on this and had planned to use this bomb collar as like an alibi. Like, it wasn't me. I was tricked into this. These black men, they got me. Like, sent them off on a wild goose chase. They're never gonna find these people. They're gonna believe him. He's gonna like get excuse from it. It's all gonna be fine. They thought that maybe he really had just done this as like an alibi to get away with it. Problem was though, he thought that the collar was fake, apparently. And the other 3 people knew that it was very much real. Police's earlier suspicion that there had never been an intention of letting Brian live was kind of confirmed in this theory, because they thought those 3 people wanted Brian to die. They wanted him to be a scapegoat. They wanted him to be in on it so that they didn't have to do any dirty work, but they wanted him to go down there, get caught, and fucking die. Their plan though was that he made it to the next step, dropped off the money, and then died. Like, that was the whole plan as far as police were concerned at this point. They claimed that Brian only found out that the bomb was real at the pizza delivery point at the TV transmission tower, and at that point he tried to run away, but they stopped him using a gun. They didn't shoot him or anything, they just were like, put it on, bitch, and then he put it on. They didn't say that, by the way, my brain just did that. Kenneth claimed that the reason Brian was okay with like going through with this was because he needed the money. He needed the money because he had a very expensive business relationship, I guess, with the sex worker who came out about them being connected in the first place. And so he wanted more money to spend on her. And her name was Jessica Hoopsick, which is weird name. So investigators and attorneys came to the conclusion that it was Kenneth and Marjorie who were conspirators, and both Brian and William were co-conspirators. In 2008, Kenneth pleaded guilty to conspiring to rob a bank and aiding and abetting, and he was sentenced to 45 years in prison, which was later reduced to only 20 after cooperating and being forthcoming and admitting his involvement in the plan. In November 2010, Marjorie was convicted of armed bank robbery, conspiracy to commit armed bank robbery, and use of a destructive device in a crime. She was sentenced later than what Kenneth was due to being ruled unfit to actually stand trial, but she was eventually sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. Then in April 2017, she actually died. She passed away of natural causes. William died in 2004, passing away from cancer before ever having to deal with any charges. Brian's family firmly believe that he had nothing to do with this whole conspiracy at all, and that he was just an innocent victim who was there at the wrong time, and it was all coincidental. And a lot of people agree with them. A lot of people do think that he was just innocent and he lost his life and he was a victim, and it's horrible what happened to him. But then there's also a lot of people who believe that's a little bit sus, he had something to do with it. It's weird that he was connected, but anyway. Despite that, he was formally charged as being a co-conspirator in essentially his own death. A lot of people do believe that he was like a willing participant up until the point where he found out it was real, and then he was like, nah, fuck this, I'm out. But we'll never know. In 2018, Jessica Hoopsick, who was the sex worker involved with Brian, she came out and said that her friend Kenneth had actually asked her, who do you think would be a good scapegoat? And she said, this guy Brian, at which point she connected the two, and like they used him to bring in on this plan just to end up killing him, which is what the police suspected originally. She recommended Brian, thinking he was like a pushover and an easy target, and she just didn't really care about him at the time. She claims that she just handed him over in return for cash and drugs, and now she feels bad about it now. She regrets her decision and feels remorse for both him and his family for what she, like, it wasn't her fault necessarily, but if she genuinely handed him over knowing what was going to happen to him, it's like, you did play a part in that. Despite her coming out about this, a lot of people don't believe that she's a credible witness because she was on drugs and she was like going through some shit, so I guess we'll never really know whether that was true or not either. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the insane pizza bomber robbery heist story. Let me know what you think about this one in the comments down below. I want to know who you think actually did it. Do you think that it was William or Marjorie or Brian or Kenneth or all of them? Who do you think the ringleader was? Who do you think the mastermind was? Because there's a lot of lawyers and people who were involved in the case who really believe it was actually William who was the mastermind, and he was smart enough to sort of hide behind Marjorie, and because he died, like, nothing ever went through with that, and like whatever. Let me know what you guys think. Who do you think cooked all this up? And let me know, do you think Brian was involved, or do you think that he was just a victim? I would love to know what you think. Let me know in the comments down below, or you can head over to my Facebook, which is Skyweb with 3Bs, because I would love to hear it. Be sure to give this video a big thumbs up if you feel like it. I would really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so that you can see all my new videos. I post every single Thursday all about true crime, and I would love to have you be a part of it. Make sure you guys are being safe out there. Make sure you don't deliver pizzas if it's the end of the shift. Just go home. Don't let people put bombs around your neck, even if they're friends and even if you think they're fake. And most importantly, don't date people called Marjorie, because they'll kill you. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!